Good day. So I'm creating this video to basically explain the challenges and the solutions I came up with and found while installing a new steady bearing or collar bearing on a two-piece drive shaft on my 1977 GMC 1500. So I've watched a lot of YouTube videos and got a lot of good ideas from them. So I decided I'm going to actually do my best to document this and put it on YouTube so other people can gain from what I've learned from this process. So my apologies for the quality of the video. It's all taken on my phone. I haven't done this very often, but hopefully you'll glean some useful information from this that will hopefully help you. So thanks for watching and have a good day.
So the issue we're solving today is the drive shaft support bearing. So if you look, there's a bearing in the center of the drive shaft to keep it steady, and it's got this rubber grommet around it, and it's got all sorts of, I'm not sure if the video's showing it, but all sorts of play in the bushing on this bearing, and this is causing it to thump back, that sort of thing. And in particular, when you're on the highway, it's a lot of vibration that comes through the floor, and I'm quite certain it's this because the rubber is all old, dried out, and there's way too much play. Bearing is probably shot too. Even if it's not, I'm going to replace the whole unit. So yeah, so I'm going to take those two bolts out there. I'm going to take the yoke off the differential, pull the drive shaft off, and then going to pull the drive shaft out of the transmission, and then we're going to pull the bearing off and put the new one on. So that's the project for today. So taking the yoke off, these are actually 7/16 bolts. There's 4 of them, 2 on this side, 2 on this side, to take the yoke off the differential. Well, not the yoke, but to remove the drive shaft from the differential. Next is removing the center bearing collar from the body of the vehicle. So there's an 11/16 nut on the top, and the bottom bolt is a 5/8. So I'm going to use a breaker bar, use some penetrating oil to get the 5/8 bolt, 11/16 nut off of each of the sides. So the shaft drives down and I can pull it off of the transmission yoke. Got a two-piece drive shaft that I've taken out of a 1977 GMC truck, and the problem is the carrier bearing, in particular the spacer, is dried out and shot, and it's causing driveline vibrations and clunking. So I removed the drive shaft, the two-piece drive shaft, and I'm attempting to pull the drive shaft apart so I can pull off the old carrier bearing and press on the new one. However, the challenge is the drive shaft is not separating. It pulls out that far, and there appears to be something stopping it. So there's a seal in here, a plastic seal, dust sleeve, I guess, to keep crap from getting in there. I'm just wondering, is that catching on the lip and I just need to pull it out to get it over the lip? Or is this grease nipple need to come out? Is it catching on a ridge, or what exactly is going on? It's the first time I've ever done a two-piece drive shaft, so I really don't know, and I don't want to put too much pressure on it for fear of buggering something. So I spoke to my brother about this issue, and he actually told me the solution. So if you use a wire brush, I've got a brass brush on the end of a drill. If you clean around the pieces, you can actually see there's a collar that's threaded onto here. There was so much road grime and garbage on there I couldn't actually see it, but once you wire brush it off, you can see that it's actually got a cap that's threaded onto the end, which is preventing the shafts from separating. So I cleaned it off with the wire brush nicely. Then I'm going to take a torch and I'm going to heat the cap to help loosen it up. and then I'm going to use a pipe wrench and a bar in the yoke to remove this cap, and then it should come apart no problem. So that's actually how you get it off. So this is what it looks like once you get the end cap off. That end cap screwed off and the seal ring was on the inside. You pull the sealed ring off and there you go. Now the bearing is exposed and ready to be pulled off. Also note that there was a bunch of garbage around this shaft that I used my wire brush to clean off as well, because essentially this is a very tight fit on there and you don't want any garbage in there getting in the way. So I wire brushed all the shaft off, so when I pull the bearing off it slides off, and then once I get this bearing off I'm just going to emery it, clean it up nicely before I press on the new bearing. You can also see how totally worn and garbage the support housing was with that rubber. The rubber to absorb any shock that there is was completely shot, crap shaking around in there. And then when you turn the actual bearing itself, it's hard to turn. There's clearly some notches in there, so the bearing is indeed shot also. So no sense replacing just the rubber when the bearing is shot. Now to pull off the bearing, I installed the bearing separator tight on the bearing. Got a couple large long pieces of all thread. Got a piece of square tubing, drilled holes in the end so I have something to press against. And then I took this old scissor jack that I had and I used my cutter and I cut out a couple of notches from the side plate here. Notched it out so it'll fit in between here, and then I'm going to jack in between here to pull the bearing off. Here's the contraption I built with the bearing puller, the all threads, the notched out scissor jack in between, pushing on the flat bar square tubing. So now what I'm going to do is crank to open up the jack, and that should pull off the bearing. Let's hope. So with the contraption, what I had to do, I tried jacking it to pull the bearing off, and basically I was bending the input on this jack. So essentially what I decided to do is I put it under a maximum load that I could get with the jack, so it was under load. And then I took my torch here and I heated the living piss out of the bearing, and I heated it and heated it and heated it until I thought it was really good and hot. And then I stopped heating it, and then when it cooled, the temperature differential as it cooled allowed it to pop right off. So it actually popped off, so now I'm just going to jack it all the way off, and the bearing is now off. So then the final step was I got some aluminum tubing that, from a diameter perspective, on the inside diameter it was large enough to clear the shaft to push the new bearing on, but from an exterior diameter perspective it fit within the bearing, so it only pushed on the inner race. So I cut a piece of this tubing to the proper length, and I used it with a sledgehammer to gently press the new bearing onto the shaft. Then after that I reassembled the drive shaft, greased everything properly, and then simply reversed the instructions that I put on as far as removal to reinstall the drive shaft back into the truck. So everything is back in place. So when I reinstalled the shaft, I put the transmission in first, then I put the universal back into the yoke of the differential, and then finally reinstalled the bolts on the carrier bearing. Now, to be fair as well, not all drive shafts are indexed. So what indexing is this drive shaft on the splines, both in the transmission yoke, the splines in the connector between the two pieces of the shaft. There's actually one of the splines is actually a double spline to index it, so you can't actually install it improperly. The universal joints have to be installed at orientation to one another to actually work properly, and the indexing caused that to happen. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.